Guys, how's it going? TJ here with Dead History, and today is our next Vice Presidential Series installment, and we're taking a look at the 7th Vice President of the United States, the man behind me, John C. Calhoun. Yeah, but first, before we get into John C. Calhoun, what I need everybody to do is hit subscribe down below, leave us a like, thumbs up, comments, questions, all that good stuff. Go do it all. And now, we're going to sit back and relax because it's time for the next Vice Presidential Series installment looking at number 7, John Caldwell Calhoun, the guy behind me. And this is Dead History. Hey guys, TJ back with you. No Henry today, just got me solo. But I'm going to go through Henry's bit for you, don't worry. And today is, of course, our next Vice Presidential Series installment. Yep, this guy, the 7th Vice President, John C. Calhoun. He's next up. We got some cool things to tell you about John C. Calhoun. He was number 7. He also, besides George Clinton, he was also a vice president who was vice president under 2 different presidents, just like George Clinton. Yeah, he was vice president under John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. We're going to get into all that. He was also a Secretary of War, he was a senator, and yeah, he actually was a slave owner, and he was a big proponent of the South. He was a big time Southern supporter and a supporter of slavery. We're going to get into all that about John C. Calhoun. Some fascinating things to tell you. So you did the likes, you did the subscribes. Hopefully you're leaving those comments and questions. Likes, thumbs up, all that good stuff, right? And if Henry was here, he'd let you know. Now you got to go get the potato chips, the popcorn, the pretzels, the soda, whatever it is that you like. Maybe it's candy corn. It's Halloween season. Who knows? Whatever you like to snack on, go get it. Because now it's time for our next Vice Presidential Series installment looking at the 7th Vice President of the United States, John C. Calhoun. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hey guys, welcome. TJ here with Dead History, and welcome to our next Vice Presidential Series installment as we're taking a look at the 7th Vice President of the United States, John C. Calhoun. So I'm here solo, of course, for the audio portion. I'm actually solo for everything this week, as you guys probably have noticed. Reason being is Henry, he had a possible exposure to COVID. Henry's stepdad tested positive about a week ago now. So unfortunately, Henry had to be out of school, and Henry had to be out of baseball activities. And obviously, he's just been kind of held up in the house. But the good news is everybody in the house has since tested negative. And Henry's felt fine. He's never felt any sort of effects or felt ill or anything like that. So very good news. So Henry definitely will be back for next week's installment of our Vice Presidential Series. And so good news. But that's the reason Henry unfortunately was not with us this week. So we're going to jump right in. John C. Calhoun, there's a good amount of information to go over with Calhoun. We're going to do 2 parts as we always do. First part, we're going to try to take a look at the early life and the, childhood and kind of leading up to his vice presidency. And then in part 2, we'll take a look at the vice presidency, his legacy, his death, his burial, and then, of course, his gravesite. So, without further ado, let's hop right in here to John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun assumed office as the nation's 7th vice president on March 4th of 1825, during a period of extraordinary political ferment. The demise of the Federalist Party after the War of 1812 had not, as former President James Monroe had hoped, ushered in an era of good feelings, free from party divisions. Contrary to Monroe's expectations, the partisan strife of earlier years had not abated during his 2 terms as president, but had instead infected the Republican Party, which had declined into a broad-based but rapidly disintegrating coalition of disparate elements. 5 individuals, all of them Republicans, had entered the 1824 presidential contest, one of the most controversial and bitterly contested races in the nation's history. The National Republicans, a group that included Calhoun, House Speaker Henry Clay, and Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, supported an expansive nationalist agenda. The Radicals, allies of Treasury Secretary William Crawford, were strict constructionists and advocates of limited government. Other Republicans had rallied to the standard of Andrew Jackson, a former Tennessee senator and the military hero whose stunning victory at the Battle of New Orleans had salvaged the nation's pride during the War of 1812. In this momentous contest, John Quincy Adams had emerged the winner, but his victory came at great cost to his administration and to the nation. The election was decided in the House of Representatives, where Clay had used his influence as leader of the Western Bloc and as Speaker to secure Adams' election. Adams, in turn, had appointed Clay Secretary of State, a nomination that stunned Jackson supporters, strict constructionists, and particularly Vice President Calhoun. The corrupt bargain deeply offended Calhoun's strict sense of honor and propriety, pushing him toward the opposition camp. A fragmented assortment of radicals, Southern agriculturalists, and men of conscience who shared the vice president's conviction that Adams and Clay had subverted the popular will. These diverse elements, which were frequently at odds with one another, would eventually coalesce to form the Democratic Party. But the nation would first pass through a chaotic and turbulent period of political realignment, which Calhoun described for his friend and mentor Monroe in the summer of 1826. Never in any country was there in so short a period so complete an anarchy of political relations. Every prominent public man feels that he has been thrown into a new attitude and has to re-examine his position and reapply principles to the situation into which he was so unexpectedly and suddenly thrown as if by some mighty political revolution. Was he of the old Republican Party? He finds his prominent political companions who claim and take the lead to be the very men against whom he had been violently arrayed till the close of the late war, and sees in the opposite rank as enemies those with whom he was proud to rank. Taking it all together, a new and dangerous state of things has suddenly occurred, of which no one can see the result. It is, in my opinion, more critical and perilous than any I have ever seen. Congress was changing as well. The Senate, as Senator Robert C. Byrd has noted in his authoritative history, was beginning to challenge the House as the principal legislative forum of the nation. Before the 1820s, the press and public had paid relatively little attention to the Senate's deliberations, being drawn instead to the livelier and more entertaining theater in the House of Representatives. By 1825, the House had become too large to permit in the lengthy speeches and extended debates that had drawn observers to its galleries, while in the Senate, growth had brought increased influence. At the formation of the government, Calhoun observed in his inaugural remarks, the members of the Senate were probably too small to attract the full confidence of the people, and thereby give to it that weight in the system which the Constitution intended. This defect has, however, been happily removed by an extraordinary growth: 11 new states and 22 senators in a 36-year period. The 1819-1820 debate over the extension of slavery into the Missouri Territory signaled that an era of increasingly virulent sectional discord had arrived. The Senate, with its equality of representation among states and rules permitting extended debate, would become the forum where sectional concerns were aired, debated, and reconciled during the next turbulent quarter century. John Calhoun, who presided over the Senate at the dawning of this era, had reached the height of his career. Given his mediocre rise to national prominence as a talented young congressman during the War of 1812, and his solid record of accomplishment as Secretary of War during Monroe's administration, he had every reason to assume that he would one day become president. John Caldwell Calhoun was born on March 18th of 1782 near Long Canes Creek, an area later known as the Abbeville District, located in present-day McCormick County, South Carolina. His parents, Patrick and Martha Caldwell Calhoun, were of Scottish-Irish ancestry. The Calhouns had immigrated to Pennsylvania during the 1730s and moved steadily southward until 1756, when Patrick reached the South Carolina backcountry. One of the most prosperous planters and one of the largest owners of enslaved people in his district, Patrick Calhoun was a leader in local politics. He served in the South Carolina legislature from 1768 to 1774. During the late 1760s, he was a regulator, one of the self-appointed vigilants whose well-intentioned but rough efforts to impose justice on a crime-racked frontier wholly lacking in judicial institutions finally prompted the South Carolina legislature to establish circuit courts in the backcountry. During the Revolution, he sided with the Patriot cause. Young John Calhoun received only a sporadic education during his early years, attending a field school for a few months each year. In 1795, he entered a private academy in Appling, Georgia, but the school closed after a few months. The boy plunged into an exhausting course of self-study, but his father's death soon forced him to return to Abbeville to manage the family farm. The disappointed young scholar remained at home until 1800, when his mother and brothers, having recognized his formidable intellectual abilities, returned him to the academy, which had since reopened. He was a diligent student, qualifying for admission to Yale College in 1802. Calhoun completed his studies at Yale in 1804. After graduation, he spent a month at the Newport, Rhode Island summer retreat of Florida BONNEAU Calhoun. Mrs. Calhoun was the widow of the future vice president's cousin, Senator John Ewing Calhoun. Her daughter, also named Floride, was attractive, well-connected in South Carolina Low Country circles, and socially accomplished. John C. Calhoun married his young cousin in 1811. The union conferred wealth and social prestige on the earnest young upcountry lawyer, but Calhoun was also attracted to Floride's beauty of mind, soft and sweet disposition, and amiable and lovable character. Not until later would he experience her stubborn will and unwavering sense of moral rectitude, so like his own. Calhoun began his legal education in 1804, soon after leaving Newport, studying first in Charleston and later at the Litchfield, Connecticut School of Tapping REEVE, a distinguished scholar who counted among his former students such notables as James Madison and Aaron Burr. He returned to South Carolina in 1806 and served brief apprenticeships at Charleston and Abbeville. Admitted to the bar in Abbeville in 1807, Calhoun soon found another calling. In the summer of 1807, he helped organize a town meeting to protest the British attack on the American vessel Chesapeake off the Virginia coast. His speech recommending an embargo and an enhanced defense posture electrified the militantly nationalistic crowd assembled at the Abbeville courthouse, winning him immediate acclaim. He was elected to the South Carolina legislature, where he served 2 terms, and in 1810, he won a seat in the United States House of Representatives. So just a little bit more about the early life of John Calhoun. As I said, John Caldwell Calhoun was born in Abbeville District, South Carolina on March 18th of 1782. The 4th child of Patrick Calhoun and his wife Martha Caldwell. Patrick's father, also named Patrick Calhoun, had joined the Scotch-Irish immigration movement from County Donegal to southwestern Pennsylvania. And after the death of the elder Patrick in 1741, the family moved to southwestern Virginia. Following the defeat of British General Edward Braddock at the Battle of Monongahela in 1755, the family, fearing Indian attacks, moved to South Carolina in 1756. Patrick Calhoun belonged to the Calhoun clan in the tight-knit Scotch-Irish community on the southern frontier. He was also known as an Indian fighter and an ambitious surveyor, farmer, planter, and politician, elected to the South Carolina legislature. As a Presbyterian, he stood opposed to the established Anglican planter elite based in Charleston. He was not a patriot in the American Revolution, and he opposed ratification of the federal Constitution on grounds of states' rights and personal liberties. Calhoun would eventually adopt his father's states' rights beliefs. Young Calhoun showed scholastic talent, and although schools were scarce on the Carolina frontier, he was enrolled briefly in an academy in Appling, Georgia, and it soon closed. He continued his studies privately, and then when his father died, his brothers were away starting business careers, and so the 14-year-old John Calhoun took over management of the family farm and 5 other farms. For 4 years, he simultaneously kept his reading and his hunting and fishing. He kept up his reading and hunting and fishing, I should say. The family decided he should continue his education, and so he resumed studies at the academy after it reopened. With financing from his brothers, he went to Yale College in Connecticut in 1802. And for the first time in his life, John Calhoun encountered serious, advanced, well-organized intellectual dialogue that could shape his mind. Yale was dominated by President Timothy Dwight, a Federalist who became his mentor. Dwight's brilliance entranced and sometimes repelled Calhoun. Biographer John Niven says Calhoun admired Dwight's extemporaneous sermons, his seemingly encyclopedic knowledge, and his awesome mastery of the classics, of the tenets of Calvinism and metaphysics. No one, he thought, could explicate the language of John Locke with such clarity. Dwight repeatedly denounced Jeffersonian democracy, and Calhoun challenged him in class. Dwight could not shake Calhoun's commitment to republicanism. "Young man," retorted Dwight, Your talents are of high order and might justify you for any station, but I deeply regret that you do not love sound principles better than sophistry. You seem to possess a most unfortunate bias for error. Dwight also expounded on the strategy of secession from the Union as a legitimate solution for New England's disagreements with the national government. Calhoun made friends easily, read widely, and was a noted member of the debating society of Brothers in Unity. He graduated as valedictorian in 1804. He studied law at the nation's first independent law school, Tapping Reeve Law School in Litchfield, Connecticut, where he worked with Tapping Reeve and James Gould. He was admitted to the South Carolina bar in 1807. Biographer Margaret Coit, argues that every principle of succession or states' rights which Calhoun ever voiced can be traced right back to the thinking of intellectual New England, not the South, not slavery, but Yale College and Litchfield Law School made Calhoun a nullifier. Dwight, Reeve, and Gould could not convince the young patriot from South Carolina as to the desirability of succession, but they left no doubts in his mind as to its legality. And then, of course, on a personal note, January of 1811, Calhoun married FLORIDE BONNEAU Calhoun, a first cousin once removed. She was the daughter of wealthy United States Senator and lawyer John E. Calhoun, a leader of Charleston high society. The couple ended up having 10 children over 18 years, interestingly enough. And Calhoun's fourth child, Anna Maria, married Thomas Green Clemson, who later founded Clemson University in South Carolina. Calhoun was not openly religious. He was raised as an Orthodox Presbyterian, but he was attracted to Southern varieties of Unitarianism, of the sort that attracted Jefferson. Southern Unitarianism was generally less organized than the variety popular in New England. He was generally not outspoken about his religious beliefs. And after his marriage, Calhoun and his wife attended the Episcopal Church, of which she was a member. In 1821, Calhoun became a founding member of All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. Historian Merrill Peterson describes Calhoun intensely serious and severe. He could never write a love poem, though he often tried, because every line began with, "Whereas." John C. Calhoun arrived in Washington shortly after the 12th Congress convened on November 4th of 1811, taking quarters in a boarding house soon to be known as the War Mess. The nation's capital boasted few amenities during the early 19th century, and members of Congress rarely brought their families to town. They lodged instead with colleagues from their own states or regions, and, as one student of early Washington discovered, the members who lived together took their meals together and spent most of their leisure hours together, also voted together with a very high degree of regularity. Calhoun's messmates included two members of the South Carolina delegation, Langdon CHEVES and William LOWNDES. Felix Grundy of Tennessee and the newly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives, Henry Clay of Kentucky. They and other like-minded young congressmen known as the War Hawks believed that nothing short of war would stop British raids on American shipping and restore the young nation's honor. Calhoun, who had been appointed to the Foreign Affairs Committee at the beginning of his first term and became its chairman in the spring of 1812, playing a leading role in the effort, supporting legislation to strengthen the nation's defenses. Working in concert with Secretary of State James Monroe, he introduced the war bill that Congress approved in June of 1812. Although Calhoun soon realized that Madison was wholly unfit for the storms of war, he labored so diligently to defend the administration and to assist in the war effort that he became known as the young Hercules who carried the war on his shoulders. He was, as a historian of the period has noted, an administration leader second only to Clay. John Calhoun served in the House until 1817. Sobered by the nation's near defeat during the War of 1812, he continued his interest in military affairs, opposing troop reductions and advocating the establishment of 2 additional service academies. As his modern biographer has observed, Calhoun equated defense with national self-sufficiency. Toward that end, he accepted protective tariffs and helped draft legislation to establish the Second Bank of the United States in 1816. Concerned that the nation's interior settlements lacked the roads and other improvements that he believed essential to economic development and national security, he proposed legislation to earmark for internal improvements the $1.5 million charter fee the bank paid to the federal government, as well as the yields of government-owned bank stocks. John C. Calhoun resigned from the House in November of 1817 to accept an appointment as Secretary of War in President James Monroe's cabinet, a post he would hold for more than 7 years. Calhoun was not the president's first choice. Monroe had approached several others, but all had declined. With the nation's military establishment in complete disarray after the war, reforming a badly managed department with over $45 million in outstanding accounts at a time when the government's annual budget amounted to less than $26 million, seemed to most a near impossible task. But Calhoun believed that a strong defense establishment was essential to maintaining the nation's honor and security, and he welcomed the chance to reform the troubled department. The 32-year-old cabinet officer was also ambitious and well aware that, as another biographer has noted, no man had yet held the presidency who had not proved his worth in some executive capacity. President Monroe relied heavily on his cabinet and submitted all matters of consequence to his department heads before deciding upon a course of action, a practice that assured the gifted young war secretary a prominent role in the new administration. Monroe seems to have felt a special fondness for Calhoun and for Floride, his wife, who moved to Washington and soon became one of the capital's most popular hostesses. Official protocol during the early 19th century dictated that the president refrain from going abroad into any private companies, but when the Calhoun's infant daughter contracted a fatal illness in the spring of 1820, James Monroe visited their residence every day to check on her condition. Calhoun began his first term as Secretary of War with an exhaustive review and audit of the department's operations and accounts. Acting on his recommendations, Congress reorganized the Army's command and general staff structure, revamped the accounting and procurement systems, and voted annual appropriations to construct fortifications and pay down the war debt. By the end of Calhoun's second term as secretary, outstanding accounts had been reduced from $45 to $3 million. Congress, however, refused to approve Calhoun's proposal for a network of coastal and frontier fortifications and military roads, imposing steep cuts in the defense budget after Treasury Secretary William Crawford's 1819 annual report projected a budget deficit for 1820 of $7 million, later adjusted to $5 million. Post-war economic expansion had given way to a depression of unprecedented severity, and the Panic of 1819 had left hundreds of speculators impoverished and in debt. These conditions and Crawford's dire forecast prompted calls for sharp reduction in government expenditures. The War Department came under immediate attack, which intensified when the press reported that one of Calhoun's pet projects, an expedition to plant a military outpost on the Yellowstone River, had run significantly over budget. Some scholars have suggested that Crawford timed the release of his report both to embarrass Monroe and Calhoun and to enhance his own presidential prospects. Shortly afterwards, the president received an anonymous letter alleging that Calhoun's chief secretary had realized substantial profits from an interest in a materials contract. The transaction was not illegal, for War Department officials enjoyed considerable latitude in awarding government contracts, and the primary contractor had submitted the lowest bid. But the appearance of impropriety gave Crawford additional ammunition. Congress began an exhaustive review of the War Department, with the radicals taking the lead. Although the investigation found no evidence of malfeasance on Calhoun's part, Republicans were inherently suspicious of standing armies, and even the National Republicans were reluctant to fund a peacetime army on the scale envisioned by Calhoun. Congress ultimately reduced the War Department budget by close to 50%. So this pretty much leads us right up to the 1824 presidential election. And we're going to save that for part 2 because that's going to get into, obviously, Calhoun's first go-round as vice president and then the rest of his political career. Like I said, there's a lot to go over with Calhoun. Calhoun was an interesting person, kind of just one of these polarizing figures in our nation's early history. So we're going to save all of the vice presidential stuff and all the remaining stuff with Calhoun for part 2 tomorrow. This was kind of just a look at his early life and education and his, political rise and that sort of thing. And then we'll take a look at all the other stuff tomorrow. So there you go. That was kind of part 1 here of John Calhoun. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Now listen, as far as bonus footage goes, I'll be completely honest with you guys. John Calhoun, all of the sites and locations, meaning like birthplace and, John Calhoun slept here and all those kind of, different sites and locations. Those are all down in South Carolina primarily. And obviously I live in New Jersey. So I'm looking at like an 11 to 12 hour one-way drive. I possibly am considering doing that to bring you guys some bonus footage. But like I said to you guys a couple videos ago, if I don't get to do it, I will show you some stock photos of some cool stuff regarding Calhoun. And then I will do a bonus footage video for vice presidents. It'll be kind of a blanket bonus footage video at the end of our vice presidential series. Once this is all done, I'll hopefully over the next, 9 to 10 months or so be taking little mini road trips, and I'll get to see some of these sites, and I'll save that stuff, that bonus footage, for just a big bonus footage video, because I'm not going to get to all these places in time for each of these videos each week. Because to be honest, I just don't have the time. This week is a very busy week for me. Baseball fall season is still going on for Henry, and I'm the coach. So, we have 2 practices and 3 games this week. So I really don't know how I would make a trip down to South Carolina and back in time for practice and such. We'll see. But, so there might not be any bonus footage here at the end of this part 1. I guess you'll find out here in another minute after I'm done talking. But, I will put like kind of little, montage of his gravesite photos at the end of part 2, because of course I have visited his gravesite before, and that sort of thing. So, stay tuned. There might be bonus footage. There might not be. But part 2 tomorrow is going to be probably a pretty long one. It's probably going to be about an hour long, I would think, or close to it. There's a lot to still go over with John Calhoun, and we're going to get into all that. His legacy, vice presidency, his death, all that stuff tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And that's going to wrap this up. And I will see you guys tomorrow for part 2 of the look at our 7th Vice President of the United States, John C. Calhoun. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for all the support. Keep it up, and I'll see you tomorrow.